basement studio for an episode we're going to call, let's see if I can get this right, Supercalifragilistic Kasparas Jakucionis. Pronunciation may vary, but Illinois does have their wing, or more specifically a guard, somewhere between 6'4" and 6'6", from Lithuania, playing for FC Barcelona's basketball equivalent professionally. There are many leagues over in Spain, so I cannot say for certain if he is with the top team. I believe he's in the third or fourth tier of professional leagues over there. But bear in mind, he just turned 18 today. His birthday is May 29th, 2006. He just turned 18. Now, that's good news and bad news. The bad news, of course, is that he's not going to be Terrence Shannon Jr. next year, physically, skill-wise, any of that. But you needed a scorer, you needed a shot maker, you needed a playmaker, and you got one. And an intriguing one at that I think is part of a collection of talent that Brad Underwood and the staff have collected this offseason that's going to make next season very exciting. Now, what we're going to talk about today is I asked the Twitter followers out there to grade this offseason. I have a new column that I wrote for the 200-level Substack that I will read real quick here right after we get through the sponsors, and that kind of collected my overall thoughts of this offseason. But to start with Kasparas. Kasparas? Let's call him KJ. I need to borrow that from Derek Piper. KJ. What I'm most excited about with him after watching the tape, and I'm by no means an NBA scout, but this kid does not look like a kid physically on the court. The sort of vision and decision-making that he has against some pretty good competition over there makes me think that there, of course, will be a transition, but it may not be as jarring as it might be for others. I mentioned the body. I think that's one thing to look at here, because if you look at Igor Demin, is that how you're saying it? Igor Demin, who will, it sounds like, go to BYU for upwards of $1 million, if not $1.5 million. That kid's 6'8". He is a first-round potential lottery pick in most projections for the 2025 draft, and it's understandable why. Igor has a lot of potential, and he's got that size. I will say there is a polish to Kasparas Jakucionis' game that I find especially intriguing, and I feel comfortable enough, and I would assume that the staff does too, assuming that they paid a decent number for him, comfortable enough slotting him in at the starting 2 spot next year. What I also like about Kasparas is his ability to play point. So I'm shying away from the word wing because, unlike an AJ Store, Kasparas Jakucionis, which is a fun word to say, is not a traditional wing. He, in fact, can take over ball handling duties and point guard duties for Colin Boswell. And the fact that the two of them can play together, and both of them are pretty good off the ball too, that's exciting to me. It seems like, in terms of fit, this is a fit that I didn't really consider going into the offseason. I thought when he got Colin Boswell, it was very cut and dry. He's your point guard. Now go get just a pure scorer. You're getting more than that in Kasparas Jakucionis. I'm going to keep saying that name. Now, as I will mention in the column I'm going to read after the sponsors, there's no guarantee that KJ comes in here and lights the world on fire. He is young. He's an international player that has not played at the level consistently of what he's about to. And the Big Ten, despite some pretty mid teams, the talent level is only getting better in this portal era. Illinois, though, is staying in the forefront of that. And I think by landing Kasparas, what Brad Underwood and his staff tell me is that they are willing to look anywhere and uncover any stone to find the talent that they need. And they seem to be pretty good at targeting someone and just going and getting them. There are exceptions to that. We assume that they were going after AJ Store. And, of course, that would have been the A-plus, no doubter. Any questions you have about his personality, I get it, but that kid is a stud, and he will be very good for Kansas. But I'm sure that they started off in that direction, and then that went another way, and then they pivoted. They probably waited for David Jones from Memphis to put his name in the portal. He never did. I don't know how long that list was for this staff, and I don't know where Kasparas Jakucionis fit on that list. But the fact that they were able to be flexible enough to adjust accordingly when 1, 2, 3, 4, and however many guys dropped out, and then land with someone that might be more than a one-year player. And listen, if he's a one-year player, that means he was pretty damn good, and then he's going to the NBA. But you might have landed a more than one-year guy that will be there next year with Colin Boswell and Jeremiah Fears for what would be a dynamic backcourt. And then a front court, which Morez Johnson, a year older, Kerry Booth, a year older. Benham Rickhouse will leave because he's a fifth-year. Well, I think this is his last year. I don't think there's any more eligibility. But maybe a Tomislav Ivisic comes back as well. I mentioned in this column I'm about to read that there's kind of a 2-year plan that's unfolding here. But you still have a pretty good team for this year one, if it is, in fact, a 2-year plan. And Kasparas Jakucionis' very rare skill set for someone his age is, I think, the most enticing of all the new guys that they brought in. And there are some really talented guys. I haven't even mentioned Trey White yet, who I'm excited the fact that he's probably going to be your sixth man. You aren't going to have to pivot to, well, Trey White needs to be a 15-point-a-game scorer. Maybe he could be, but I would rather see what he can do off the bench, 20 minutes a game, growing into that role for what was a former top 50 prospect that has talent, but hasn't proven it at this level. And granted, most guys in the starting lineup have not proved it consistently at this level. There are question marks. A lot of things will have to go right. But when you can go 10 deep and you have offensive skill basically in each and every one of them, and I will include a Ty Rodgers despite his inability to make a jump shot, he is pretty good around the rim, and I think will be even better this year. And he will be better served by the guys around him that have different skill sets than what we saw last year. This 10 deep excites me. I think there's a lot of upside, and I think in this Big Ten, I think they'll compete again. Now, that is a bit of an indictment, if you will, against this Big Ten, which, despite accruing some talent, I think there's major questions on each team, whether it be, can you trust the head coach, Mike Woodson? Can you win without Zach Edey, Purdue? Can you win without really using the transfer portal, Tom Izzo and Michigan State? The list goes on. And Illinois, just like those teams, has questions. But overall, the talent level, it's hard to question. You watch the tape on these guys, they are going to score. Can they play defense? Or can they figure out some defensive scheme that will work? I don't know. But I think with the size and athleticism they have, they'll figure something out. But the other team's still going to have to score a lot of points themselves. So well done, Brad Underwood. I'm not going to give it an A or an A+ just yet because as I asked the Twitter followers, you grade it, and A was not the most popular response. It was actually B. But no one, or hardly anyone, I should say, said C, D, or I don't even think F was an option because you couldn't give this offseason an F. This is a complete upheaval of a roster, and that can be scary/exciting. But because of the quality they brought in, I lean more towards the latter. And we're entering year 8 of Brad Underwood. And in those 8 years, college basketball has changed drastically, and he seems to be changing with it, much to the betterment of this program, and I think the sustained success of this program. So before I get too far into it, let's hit the sponsors real quick. DP Dough, online at dpdough.com for all the best deals and prices. dpdough.com. They deliver anywhere in Champaign-Urbana, so go online to dpdough.com and order a custom calzone with any toppings you want, or one of their favorites like the Maui Wowie or the Buffer Zone, online at dpdough.com. Also, we have Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Sticky nights and stuffy rooms making it hard to enjoy your home during summertime. Call Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing to make sure your air conditioning is working at its peak performance. Let them tune up your AC as they do our AC by joining their maintenance program and getting all the perks that it has to offer. Or give them a call to come out for a no-cost quote to upgrade your system today with a Lennox high-efficiency system that will be sure to save you money in what is sure to be a hot summer. That number, 217-841-4728. That's 217-841-4728. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. It's that time of year to get that home addition, patio, deck, whatever project you have in mind, get it started and get a free quote today from Luke and his staff, owenbuildersllc.com. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them. And, of course, we have a website, the 200levelpod.com, which includes the audio, video, and now the Substack column. So I published this today, worked on it last night after the news came out about Kasparas Jakucionis. God, it's a fun word to say, and I think I'm getting it right. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to read this real quick, and this will lead into the discussion we had on Twitter today with the followers about this offseason in general and where things sit with Brad Underwood and company. But before I get into this, though, I made a joke that I kind of regret. I was really pissed after Illinois lost to Penn State in February. You might recall that podcast was entitled Bad Underwood. I'm not going to apologize so much because I think at that time I had some legitimate gripes with how that game unfolded, and it felt like, we're seeing things slip towards the tail end of a season again, and what does that mean for March? Yeah, it was reactionary, but I'm a fan. I react. One thing I said on that podcast was, what exactly does Jeff Alexander do here? And me and Trevor and Isaac have joked about that for a couple years because in the aftermath of Orlando Antigua and Chin Coleman leaving, and then Stephen Gentry as well, and then you promote Jeff Alexander, and we just made this joke because Jeff Alexander just kind of exudes normal guy vibes, and that's a good thing. And by all accounts, he's a really good dude. But we made this joking pact that anytime something bad happens, just, I don't know, blame it on Jeff Alexander. It makes no sense, I agree, but it was some sort of easy scapegoat, just like you would in baseball. Blame the hitting coach. Yeah, well, we know the players are sucking, or maybe the general manager didn't get enough talent, but who's going to get fired? The hitting coach or the pitching coach. Well, Jeff Alexander has his hands all over this Kasparas Jakucionis commitment. He has his hands over at least some of the Tomislav Visic recruitment. I'm sure Orlando Antigua helped close that. He has his hands all over the Jeremiah Thiers commitment. If Jeff Alexander is your third assistant, and he's landing the likes of Kasparas Jakucionis and Jeremiah Thiers, and helping you fostering a really strong pipeline to Europe, that's your third assistant? You're in a great position right now. So I got to give props to Jeff Alexander from the get-go here. And I published this story and realized I didn't mention him, but it was already a bit of a wordy story anyway, so I didn't want to belabor the point, but well done, Jeff. All right, a little bit of water there. Let me read this real quick and then react to also what you guys thought about this offseason on Twitter. Remember AJ Storr? Oh, well, first off, okay. The title of this column, just like the podcast, Supercalifragilistic Kasparas Jakucionis. And then the sub-headline, Brad Underwood rounds out a skilled roster with the addition of the Lithuanian guard. Remember AJ Storr? While watching the Big Ten tournament, I found myself envisioning Wisconsin's sophomore as Terrence Shannon Jr. The athleticism, burst, and skill leapt off the TV screen as he helped the Badgers take the Illini to the wire in the final. So when the offseason began and Kansas ho-hummedly grabbed one of the top players off the board, one who made perfect sense to land at Illinois, it was easy to fall back into the mental vortex of, why can't we have nice things? Well, in the words of Kane from Kung Fu, patience, young grasshopper. For the second year in a row, Brad Underwood has completed a successful offseason. One that, despite a couple of big-name misses, Ray J. Dennis in 23, A.J. Storr in 24, still resulted in a balanced, skilled roster with tons of upside. Just like last year, it took Underwood until the end of May to complete his squad. In portal season, as in life, patience is a virtue. The latest and potentially most exciting addition is Lithuanian guard Kasparas Jakucionis. His shot-making ability, around 40% from three, and court vision, over 5 assists per game in the Liga EBA, will allow him and Kylan Boswell to take turns running point and playing off ball. His length can provide help on the boards, over 6 rebounds per game in Liga EBA, and his high free throw percentage, nearly 90% in his career, means you can play him in closing time. He just turned 18 years old. Happy birthday, KJ. But he looks and plays much older than that. It remains to be seen whether or not his 19 points per game in Liga EBA will translate to similar gaudy stats in college. But unlike last year's Illini team that relied heavily on the offensive firepower of TSJ and Marcus Damask, this year's roster appears to have more balance when it comes to scoring. After all, how often will KJ, or anyone else for that matter, be asked to put up 20 points per game? Throughout Underwood's tenure, his teams have found success on the backs of their All-American Uber studs. Ayo Dosunmu, Kofi Coburn, Terrence Shannon Jr. are the biggest reasons why you've won 3 Big Ten regular season or tournament titles. This roster doesn't have a singular proven talent like Ayo, Kofi, or TSJ. Thus, it may be a by-committee approach on offense, balance over reliance. It reminds me of the way a former Big Ten coach went about roster construction. The way in which Brad Underwood navigated this offseason seems very John Beilein-esque. Remember the Wagner brothers? Do we say Wagner or Wagner? Wagner? Mo and Franz, both on German U19 professional teams before heading to Ann Arbor. Enter Kasparas Jakucionis, a skilled wing whose early developmental years were with Barca's U19 squad. Remember Duncan Robinson? He was a 6'7" dynamic scorer who started his career at D3 Williams College before being plucked by Beeline. Once unheralded, he's 6 seasons deep into his NBA career. Enter Benjamin Rickhouse, a 6'9" sharpshooter who started his career at Huntington University at the NAIA level. Now, in fairness, I can't quite state the same comp for Tomislav Ivisic, other than the fact that Beeline had an eye for international talent. And doesn't Ivisic just seem like someone who would have been on Michigan's radar in 2016? Yes, Beeline had the occasional dude. Trey Burke comes to mind. But his success was often the result of balanced rosters that were highly skilled. Karis LeVert, Derek Walton, DJ Wilson, Zach Irvin, Nick Stauskas, Jordan Poole, Mo Wagner, Franz Wagner, Duncan Robinson. This offseason, skill was valued overall, and finding an offensive philosophy that works at the college level, or after finding it, Underwood identified players who could help make it hum, albeit in a slightly different fashion than last year. So now that we have all these new toys, we can conjure up a two-deep that appears very strong. And here's what I came up with. Let me know what you think. Starting point guard Colin Boswell. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn backing him up. First guard off the bench. Shooting guard Kasparas Jakucionis, and I have Jake Davis behind him. 6'6", 3-point shooter. You could put him at the 2 and feel good about that. At the 3, you got Ty Rodgers and Trey White, but I have Ty getting the starting nod, which I'll explain in a bit. Benham Rickhouse, the starting 4. Kerry Booth, your backup. And at center, Tomislav Ivisic will start, I assume, with Morez Johnson getting plenty of time. Now, first, why Ty over Trey White to start? Even in this portal-dependent era of college basketball, there's something to be said for continuity. He's well-respected by his teammates and brings some necessary toughness and edge. In addition to these tangible qualities, he is a fantastic rebounder and sometimes great defender, less so against quick guards. And in a lineup with Boswell, KJ, Rickhouse, and Ivisic, do you really need offensive pop from the 3 spot? No. Do you need some defensive grit? Someone to hound the boards? Definitely. The other 4 seem relatively set to start games. Of the remaining 5, 3 seem most likely to play big roles, give or take 20 minutes a game. So there's 1, Trey White. There's a good chance he'll log as many, if not more minutes than Ty. Standing 6'7" with the ability to slash, score, rebound, and sometimes hit from outside, 30% from 3 at Louisville. His skill set's intriguing. Watching the tape, you can see why he was a top 50 recruit. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn. This offseason went beautifully for DGL. He'll be the first guard off the bench. Given how unproven he is, this could be cause for concern. But in his moments last February and March, he looks game ready. Now it's just a matter of getting more tick and making the most of it. Morez Johnson. As part of a front court rotation with Ivisic and Rickhouse, Morez gives Underwood the opportunity to mix and match. Because the other 2 bigs' ability to score inside and out, Underwood isn't facing the same can you play them at the same time quandary as he did with Coleman and Dane. When Kerry Booth is being discussed as your 9th best player, and Jake Davis, a 6'6" wing who shoots 40% from 3, will be scratching for playing time, your program's in a good place. Now, there are question marks to be sure. Namely, how will Underwood get all these new pieces, 8 in total, to mesh on and off the court? Chemistry in sports can be fickle. For as well as Underwood and his staff managed this last year, we saw what happened when it didn't go well in 2022-23. This is a roster of old and young, American and international, potential NBA prospects, and guys just looking to establish themselves at the college level. Entering his 8th year, Underwood has earned the benefit of the doubt. It won't be perfect. There will be frustrating moments. You guys know me. And it will be difficult to match the late season success of the 2024 team. The good news for fans, unlike last year, we won't be entering this year with a one-shot mindset. The 2024 roster was full of 5th-year seniors. This one, not so much. While there inevitably will be attrition next offseason, there's a decent chance that Underwood retains the core while adding Jeremiah Fierce to the mix. This, quote, 2-year plan is a little easier on the ticker than 2021. Dear God, please win the Big Ten. Or 2024. Dear God, just please make it past the first weekend. Furthermore, does anyone in the Big Ten really scare you? I mean, an Edie-less Purdue, a talented but Mike Woodson coached Indiana team, Michigan State relying on Jaden Akins to finally click. Perhaps most intriguing are USC and UCLA, loaded with talent and led by occasionally very successful coaches. But their first year in a new conference will inevitably present challenges. With a talent on board, Brad Underwood has yet again produced a roster that can compete at the top of the Big Ten. So a 2-year plan? Sure, I'm on board. But why not make a run in year one? So this article was kind of a summation of the offseason and everything that happened, and Kasparas Jakucionis is the cherry on top. And it was a necessary position that they needed to fill, and they did, and they got a very skilled individual to take that spot. I mentioned the questions, chemistry being foremost among them. When you get 8 new pieces, there's no guarantee it's going to work. As Trevor alluded to in our text thread, UCLA loaded with talent last year, some international guys. They were projected to be pretty good, and they fell flat on their face. Now, I think Mick Cronin is a bit of a dingus, despite making the, national title game a couple years ago. He is a surly son of a gun. And I think between him and an Eric Musselman, who, again, accrued a lot of talent for USC coming into this season, those guys, there's something mercurial about them where you know they're capable of rattling off a 26, 27-win season and making a deep run in the tournament, but they seem more likely to have a lower floor. I use the word mercurial just because they're a little bit more hot and cold. Brad Underwood, to his credit, when the cold year since he got this thing running was 2023, when you got a 8 seed or 9 seed, I forget, in the NCAA tournament, and that's the down year, that's a good place to be. And while this team doesn't have the elite Terrence Shannon Jr. or Ayo Dosunmu or Kofi Coburn, the overall balance, especially offensively, makes me think that there is some combination of these 10 guys that's going to work. And it is probably only going to be 10 guys. I mean, Jason Jatskis, or however you say his last name, I would assume he redshirts. So that's 10 dudes, a couple open scholarships. Maybe they'll get a guy early, bring in a prep 2025 guy at the semester along with Jeremiah Fears. I don't know how they're going to use that, but they don't need to. I think they have enough. They got shooters across the board. They got good free throw shooters across the board. They have guys that can do some booty ball, whether that be a Trey White, who I know they're kind of high on with that, or maybe even a little bit of KJ here because he does have a bigger body than most 18-year-olds. Benham Rickhouse, of course, has been pretty heralded since he got here, and I think for good reason, because as a friend of mine, Andrew, who's been on the podcast before, sent me, there's some very small list of 6'8" plus guys in college basketball that have averaged 12 plus points a game, 40+% from three, and Duncan Robinson was one of those names, and that's why I made the comparison in this column. You just look across the board, and we don't know for sure what we're going to get from Thomas Slavovicic, who's 21 years old and has been playing against really good talent in Europe and already has the body. And we don't know what KJ is going to bring you either because he is very young. But you don't need all of these guys to hit in order to find, I think, a combination to a 7 or 8 man rotation that works and potentially works very well. And this Big Ten's still open. I don't think I can point at one team and say they're going to win it. Can you really point at Indiana in your heart of hearts and say they're going to win it? Yeah, they got 2 studs on the front court, and that's great. They did the same thing last year. Their guard plays a little bit more proven, let's say, steady, but not any dynamic dudes in the backcourt that really scare you. And hey, good luck to Luke, as much as I can say that to anyone playing for the Indiana Hoosiers, but I don't know where he would have fit on this roster. The minute you got Jake Davis, and now especially that you got someone like Jakucionis who can really shoot the three himself, you got 3-point shooters. You got guys that, as much as I like Luke defensively and off on the boards towards the tail end of that season, and he was really big for you in March, I understand why that wasn't necessarily the fit going into this next season. Listen, Underwood's taking a swing, and it could not work. I mean, that is a possibility, and if so, that is going to be a big swing and a miss, but he is taking a swing. What I feel good about is this all seems very calculated. It seems very well planned out. And it seems like there's a vision in mind of what he wants this next year's team to look like and really the future of this program. Last year, in many ways, was a weird stopgap year. Okay, we get Terrence and we get Coleman back. So we know we aren't going to suck. Get some dudes around that beforehand to hopefully entice them to come back and just kind of fill out the roster. Now, if Terrence and Coleman don't come back last year, we're having a very different conversation, but fortunately they did, and we can have this conversation after an Elite Eight run and a Big Ten tournament championship. You had that success, and now Underwood is parlaying that and doing, I think, a pretty good job of balancing one-year rentals with maybe more long-term fixtures. And in this portal era, a long-term fixture is anyone here more than a year. I think there's some guys on this team that will be that. And there's also probably a couple that won't get the role they want, and then they're going to leave next year. That's how the cookie crumbles. But do you have faith in Brad Underwood when that inevitably happens to go out and get another talented guy? I do. And for the most part this offseason, Dante Maddox, he committed to Xavier pretty early, and that would have been a nice pickup. But if you're asking me would I rather have Dante Maddox or Kasparas Jakucionis, I'm taking the latter. Understanding that Dante Maddox probably has a higher floor because he's proven more at college basketball in this country. And he would have been pretty darn good. But it's sort of like if you're on a game show and it's like, what's in the box? Do I want the mystery box or do I want the proven commodity? Given that this is not a one-shot deal and you could take a bit of a chance here on someone that, if he's here 2 years, like Kasparas, I think would be, might make a huge jump next year. Yeah, I'll take that chance. I will. And understand that that might mean you don't make an Elite Eight this year. That might mean you don't win a Big Ten tournament title or a Big Ten regular season title. You aren't going to win those every year. I think for the long-term health of this program, though, this was the better move. It solidifies you more in Europe on the international circuit. And if it hits, and I think there's a chance it'll hit, then you're sitting pretty. So, yeah, if you're asking, Carp, how excited are you? Where would you grade the offseason? I didn't give you the options for minuses or pluses because Twitter doesn't give you that many options in polls. I would say an A minus, more than even a B plus. And the reason I say that, and a minus, not an A, because he didn't get a David Jones or A.J. Storr. One of those guys is a proven, I would go so far as to say, superstar of the college level. A.J. Storr is on his way to that. David Jones already is. But what I'm most impressed by is recruiting to need, recruiting guys that are very malleable, recruiting guys that would probably be switchable on defense and pretty interchangeable on offense. It is difficult to look at this roster and find a five-man lineup where you say, I don't think we can score. No, I think they'll be able to score. There are questions, of course, about, what five-man look is best on defense? I don't know, and I don't think Underwood knows. You need to play defense, we would all admit, but you still were able to overcome in January and February like the 100th best defense in the country, if not worse. And it did tighten up when it mattered in March. It did, and maybe that's an NBA-esque sort of thing. Save the defense for when it matters. I don't think that works quite as well in college, but when the lights were brightest, other than the Connecticut game, when the lights were brightest, they started playing defense again. And I think that defense is one of those things that is very much mindset, more mindset than it is athleticism, to be honest. And that will be the biggest challenge for this coaching staff. But, man, I trust that they're going to score. And they're going to be an aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball with early hiccups. And I will try to prepare myself accordingly and not jump off any ledges in November and December. But, yeah, there are going to be moments where you say, where's this thing going? Bear in mind, how did you feel about Marcus Damask on November 30th of last year? I didn't know what I felt. I thought, he's fine. He's a good piece. He scores 30 against Florida Atlantic. But remember, the few games after that, in mid-December, he kind of tailed off again. There was a probably 2-3 week period where Quincy Guerrier was a better offensive option than Marcus Damask. And then late December hits, Terrence is out for his legal situation, and Marcus Damask emerges to be a consistent, basically 20-point-a-game guy. something like that could happen with this team, whether it's a Benham Rickhouse or a Kasparas Jakucionis, where early on you don't see that consistent scoring threat, but it clicks for one of them. Or it might click for more than one of them. Or it might not click for any of them. And that's always a possibility. But I will take my chances with this roster. Not going to predict anything outlandish like, oh, they're going to win the Big Ten. There's too many questions in the conference as a whole. And there's other teams that have a high ceiling and a higher ceiling maybe than Illinois does. I'd have to take a closer look. I'm definitely drinking the Kool-Aid and think we have a high ceiling, but I'm sure that there are others that would beg to differ. So I asked you on Twitter, if you were to grade this offseason, and we have had about 240 votes, no one said D, and I didn't even put F up there because that'd be a silly response. 3% said a C. AJ Store fans, David Jones fans, did you get that A-plus superstar? You did not. You did not. Even a Kadari Richmond, who went to St. John's, that would have been more of a, I think you would have felt more at ease with that than a Kasparas Jakucionis. So I don't dismiss anyone saying C here. 54% said B, and 43% said A. So overwhelmingly positive. But I think that by more than half saying B, there's an acknowledgement that, yeah, it was pretty good. I'm excited to see this. But that B is because there were remaining questions. I told you I would say A- because I think it's all about fit and variety, skill set, and they're going to have to do a little bit of, jigsaw puzzling here, but I think they're capable as a coaching staff of doing that. So let's go through some of these responses here. Sonny says, I gave it a B. If this is the last move we made, which I presume it is, I'm happy with who we brought in. A would have been if we landed Store/Jones, because I think that would have raised our ceiling to national champion contender. And Sonny, I think it's fair to say when you make an Elite Eight, you better follow it up. And for me to give you an A for an offseason, you need to do something that makes me think you're going to be better than last year. I will say, Sonny, I don't know if this team is going to be better than last year. I think there's a chance that they can be as good in a different way. And bear in mind last year, I've been reflecting on this quite a bit. Justin Harmon from second week of January on was not good. He just wasn't. That was one of your 3 transfers in. Quincy Guerrier, nice guy, on the court had his head up his butt for much of the last 2 months. And I can't really figure out why. He had some good moments when it counted, but you just couldn't count on him. And then, Marcus Damask, of course, was just an A-plus Grand Slam. He offset the rather ho-hum contributions, I think, in some ways. And I don't want to diminish what Quincy did, but, he was lost for a good chunk of the Big Ten season, and Justin was nowhere to be found either. So you did all that. Why? Because Terrence was dominant. Coleman was really good down the stretch. And Marcus Damask. I'm not going to go so far as to say a 3-man team because Dane had a fantastic March, and Luke really started to pick it up when he was healthy again. But those are 5 guys you feel comfortable with. Ty Rodgers was very inconsistent. Quincy was inconsistent. Justin Harmon was not very good. DGL was starting to get Justin Harmon's minutes. All that to say, you will not have the 1-2 punch next year that will match a TSJ and a Marcus Damask. I do think collectively you can find your way to something close offensively. But will it be booty ball heavy? I don't know. Will it be more switch-happy offense or picks and screens? Maybe. I just think that it's difficult to analyze one team versus another by just saying, well, this guy left and you replaced him with him. What's the complete package? And I think, Sonny, to your B grade, a David Jones slotted in for Kasparas Jakucionis raises the floor quite a bit. But I'm anxious to see if the ceiling would have changed much, and that's what's going to make this whole season very interesting. From Zach, talent is great. My largest concern is the players fitting together cohesively in the system. From Ethan, I'm honestly not sure how anyone graded it less than A. In the present era, you can't look beyond the current team. Neither forward, no backward. Who transferred out? Never heard of him. Who's here now? A stellar team. I think we're going to be very good this year. I agree with that, Ethan. I was a Luke Goody fan, but I think in this roster you have other guys that can do many of the same things. I was a Dane Danger fan. I love his legacy here because of what he did that last month, how he rode that storm out, to borrow a local band's lyric, and helped you make an Elite Eight. Like, that's so cool. And he's welcome back here anytime, and we'll get a huge standing ovation as he should. But I would agree, Ethan. I don't look at any of these losses outside of the Terrence and the Marcus and Coleman, who were going to leave anyways. And Coleman, he's not coming back, and that's fine. And we haven't heard, by the way, as I'm recording this, what he is planning on doing. But it won't be here. But as for the guys that transferred out, Imani Hansberry, I got him. Man, dude, I'm sorry. I like Imani. I like Morez Johnson. I like Kerry Booth. And then we'll go out and get another 4 if we need it. I like Benham Rickhouse, and I know they're very different than Imani Hansberry, but Imani Hansberry doesn't have the offensive skill set of Benham Rickhouse. He doesn't have the size and athleticism of Morez Johnson, and certainly not the athleticism of Kerry Booth, and he might have a bad back. So I can't sit here and say that, well, this is great except for losing Imani Hansberry. Oh, well, this is great except for losing Sincere Harris, a guard that can't score. What? I love his defense, and I like the guy, but I think on the whole, you upgraded from the guys who transferred out. The question will be, can you offset the loss or overcome the loss of an All-American and a first-team All-Big Ten player in Marcus Damask, so TSJ and Damask. From the Tomahawk, don't love the new era of getting to know a whole new roster of players every year, but if it means pissing off Iowa and Purdue fans every year, bring it on. Do we finally beat Purdue this year, Tomahawk? I'd like to think so. And you only play them once, and it's at home, if I recall. One of those breaks in the schedule. All right, from Anthony. I put down B, but it seems to always be a gamble on whether these kids are going to work. It's not that long ago we were high on Sky Clark and neutral on Damask. I agree, Anthony. I think that we are becoming more astute observers of the transfer portal and what to look for. So, for example, 2 years ago, Anthony, if a Benham Rickhouse is some of the transfers in, how excited are you? This year, we're more excited because we saw the likes of a Marcus Damask from Southern come to the Big Ten and be even better. And a Benham Rickhouse from Evansville, can he do the same thing from the same conference? But I do think that we're finding, whether it be in the transfer portal era or just how good NBA basketball is, for example, people aren't looking for just stats, right? I mean, yes, I would peruse, look at David Jones and his numbers. Well, David Jones from Memphis has the numbers and he has the skill. You could see that very clearly. He's not just some sort of stat stuffer. He's a legit, very good basketball player. But there are other guys whose names were emerging in this shooting guard / wing / guard category that you needed to fill that I thought, well, okay, you can probably slot them in for 13, 14 points next year. But that doesn't mean, just based on points scored, that they're going to be as good as, or let me rephrase, that just by virtue of however many points they score, we can say that was an unqualified success in terms of the transfer portal. I do think that we're finding there are certain things that Brad Underwood or other coaches are looking for, and it goes beyond how many points did they score. A Jake Davis, for example, good freshman year for Mercer, but you're thinking, why would they get this guy from Mercer when it wasn't even double digits? Well, look beyond that. His catch and shoot rate was ridiculous. He's 6'6". He's great off the bounce. The kid has just a natural stroke. They said, this guy can fill a need. We're going to go get him. And that's what they did, as opposed to, all right, we need a 15-point per game guy. We need an 8 rebound per game guy. No. I think they're going beyond that, and I think that will increase the chances of them having success with this roster than just, hey, let's go spend $2 million on a top 5 transfer because he's a top 5 transfer. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Indiana, who had objectively a good portal season. But we can't pretend that they don't have questions too. Just because they got a few more highly regarded guys does not mean that Mike Woodson is guaranteed to have a better year than Brad Underwood, who took a few more unknown quantities or international players or someone from a smaller school like Mercer or a former D3 guy like Rickhouse. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw out there. From Chase, it'd be an A if we didn't lose Danger and Hansberry. Moretti and Goody I could live with. Harris I wasn't happy with until we scored Boswell. It's going to be hard to create the team culture we had last year with so many new and moving parts. Chase, that is true. Before they can even think about who fits where, offensively or defensively, I do think it's going to be who fits where in terms of team culture. Ty being here, I think, goes a long way in terms of continuity, being a leader. I don't know if they're going to name a captain next year, but if they do, it should be Ty. Danger and Hansberry, I disagree slightly with you. I think as much as I like Danger, and when he was on, he was on. I think that you are forcing your own hand as to what style you need to play when a Dane Danger's on the court. I think Memphis is a great fit for him. I hope he makes a tournament down there. He might. I mean, he's got David Jones on his team. Conference USA, is that what they are? Or American Conference? Whichever. That's a perfect fit for him. He's going to be productive because he's a talented guy, but you do limit, as much as I like him, you do somewhat limit what they probably want to do offensively. It is a calculated risk. You know, they could have paid him probably certainly less than $1 million to stick around and be the starting five. And maybe it could have worked better than Ivicic. They're taking a risk. We've never seen Ivicic play a college game. But I can understand why they want a five that can stretch the floor, shoot the occasional three, because that's going to make everything easier for everybody. When Dane's on the court, if Dane's not effective himself, it becomes a bit of an albatross. He just happened to be super effective in the month of March. And that means a lot, trust me. But I don't miss him and Hansberry to the same degree as you do, especially not Amani, who I liked the intangible qualities of him, and I liked his he had kind of a bounciness and a grit that said, okay, this guy's a dude, and he's going to be good at West Virginia. I back issues, just straight up, you take the back issues out, Kerry Booth or Amani Hansberry. Okay, that's an argument you can have. I do think that we need to consider back issues potentially being an issue for Amani Hansberry. I've seen that story a million times with basketball players before, and I'm not trying to excuse, oh, well, who needs him anyways? No, you went out and you got a 4 with no injury history, and you lost a 4 with some injury history, and it could be argued that the one that you got anyway in Kerry Booth has a higher upside. But, Chase, there is always risk. I'd agree with that. From Jared, B, I like all the pieces we got, but no proven studs. All young, high upside talent that will probably struggle out of the gate, but could turn into something special. Seems like a 2-year built team. I will say we didn't expect much from the transfer class last year, so who really knows? Jared, I'm with you on the 2-year idea as well. It does seem to be one team that is built for more than just a one-time deal. And that is all contingent on if Underwood can keep some of these younger pieces for more than a year. I would think they can. But, you know, hey, it's the transfer portal, so fool me once. From Deuces, A+, this team will open major eyes. Well, I like your enthusiasm, Deuces. From Jared, acquisition of talent, I firmly believe, is an A. Given the high roster turnover and the amount of just flat-out bodies they had to add, I think all Illini fans should be pleased with the talent that's been acquired and put in place. Now to see how it all works. And Jared, I'm there too. Like, I'm excited. We got to wait until November for this? Really? And I know there's going to be bumps, but I'm just excited to get to the first exhibition game and see these guys. I'm excited for the little rumblings at a fall camp. And listen, I've lived through the Alex Legions dominating in camp and so many stories, right? Oh, who was another one recently? Austin Hutcherson. Oh, man, he's bringing it. Well, he amounted to nothing, sadly. But I'm excited to get any piece of, any tidbit, whatever I can about this team because there's just that many unknowns. It's a bunch of new toys. From K. Andrew, A. As in, Illini Nation will need to get together and donate a ladder or a pair of scissors for the 2025-26 season. I like your enthusiasm, K. Andrew, and I think you are in a position as a program where that shouldn't be an outlandish thing to talk about. That's what Brad Underwood's goal is. He has a very firm foundation in place where if everything goes right and you get the right collection of talent, why not make a run at a national title? From Andy, I really like it, and hopefully enough guys come back next season while adding fears. From Eric, I have no clue about some of these players, nothing but hope. I will say the coaching staff has shown they know what they're doing. I mentioned in the column, Eric, that I think there's some benefit of the doubt that you got to give Underwood because he's had success in the transfer portal. This is a whole new bag, getting 8 guys from either the portal or going overseas. But I do think, yes, the staff knows what they're doing. All right, from Teddy. I think if we trade out in terms of what we accomplish next season, then it's probably a B. The 2-year window that we all seem to see might change the grade if at the end of those 2 years we see multiple All-Americans and a deep tourney run. Wouldn't that be something? But again, Teddy, I don't think that's outlandish. There's talent coming in here. From Goal Illini, from a talent perspective, this might be the strongest group of talent we brought in one offseason. 4 NBA-level prospects in Boswell, KJ, Big T, and Booth. I like Big T. Can we call him Big T? Nice Goal Illini. Trey White also has that ceiling. Biggest thing for us is to see how the team gels. This team will be good next year. From Jacob, unpopular opinion on your pod, but I'm more excited about football. Jacob, I want to get there. I will say the new helmets or the retro helmets they unveiled yesterday, that helped. And a couple of these pickups at cornerback have helped. I'm trying, Jacob. I'm really trying. I'm sure by August 1st, I'll find my way to being a little excited. But then the Kansas game is going to tell me so much. Anyways, back to Jacob's tweet. I think it's going to be a great season. But on the he's talking about football still. But on the basketball side, my very basic knowledge of basketball, I think will be an entertaining season. I do think entertaining, Jacob. And as long as I remind myself to divorce myself from rage or anger if there's a really bad game or two, which could happen, and just remember, go along for the ride. Jacob, it occurred to me when I was driving to school a couple days ago. Or no, it was just yesterday when the Kasparas news came out. And it occurred to me that last year, think about if you just do a time capsule thing each month of that season, November, December, January, February, March. Things were so different on a month-to-month basis. If you told me in January, or even in early February when I went to the game at Michigan State, and Illinois choked that one away, I was a little bit perturbed by that, and in the Penn State game too. But if you tell me at those points that in March, Dane Danger and Luke Goody are going to be key players in leading you to an Elite Eight run, and Terrence is going to go on some 35 points per game rampage, and Marcus will be Marcus, and Coleman will be, I would not have believed you. So that is to say that Underwood, what he did for the first time really well last year is gel at the exact right time. We saw shades of that at the tail end of the 2021 regular season. Is that right? Yeah, 2021 regular season. When they took it to, the 3 road games in the Big Ten in a row when Iowa was hurt, and then he came back for the Ohio State game. So that's at Wisconsin, at Michigan, at Ohio State, and the Big Ten tournament. That 3-week period, they were gelling, and they were getting good at the precisely right time. They were just a couple weeks too early, and then they flamed out against Loyola. So it seems as if any judgment in November and December is going to be kind of silly. Of course, we're going to be making them as we go along because that's what sports fans do, and that's what we'll do here is we're watching second halves, whether they go well or whether they don't. But things change so much on a month-to-month basis. And I will try to remember that, Jacob. As you say, entertaining season, I think it will definitely be entertaining. And I just need to remind myself. So do me a favor, listeners. Remind me as well through the season. Carp, remember, it's a process. Chill. You're almost 40. Why do you get so angry, for Christ's sake? From Steven. The transfer class this year appears to be targeted towards a 2-year run. Next year could be Final Four good if you could retain 90% of the roster. However, Underwood has struggled with losing players to the transfer portal each year. Steven, I don't know if it's so much what percentage of guys you keep as it is which guys do you keep, even if it's half of them. We'll know what the core is. And I do think, let's say by January, we'll kind of know the core that this team is riding with, right? Minutes per game may fluctuate, but I think we'll know who are the go-to guys and who are the possible multi-year players that you really want back next year. And that will be when you got to get icon, or now that there's the new law where universities, or the court case which said universities can outpay the players, right? And Josh Whitman, it's good to have a guy like him as your AD in a time like this, where start getting your ducks in a row in January when you have an idea, who do you really want to stay? And who are you like, sure, they can stay, but whatever. And what I mean by that is get your resources in line for the guys that you cannot afford to lose. I think we'll be in a good position for that. Thanks for all the feedback on Twitter. It's nice reacting to that and kind of an online conversation, and those were all very thoughtful. And, I know we are not doing as many podcasts because, we wait for news, and also I was finishing up the school year, and now that I'm a day away from having done that, and we're entering a true off-season, we'll be around for any big things to react to. I don't know what those would be, though. We will get back in earnest for sure in August as we start prepping for football season. But, we are at the ready in case any big breaking news does happen. So Illinois basketball, though, as we kind of put a lid on this offseason, assuming it is done, and I assume it is, it's just nice as an Illini fan to be in a position where you feel like things are pretty steady and that you have a high ceiling, but more importantly, you don't really have a low floor, and that you should be a tournament team, and you should be in the top half of the Big Ten. And I'm sorry. I think if things work, they will compete for a Big Ten title. It is a very favorable schedule. And I know it's very early to say that. And we don't know everything about every team. But you got this coaching staff. You have an assistant staff now that seems firmly entrenched to be here for a long time. You have NIL resources that will only get bigger. They're in a good place. And it's one of those things where for the first time in maybe, I don't know, damn near 20 years, I can consistently be sporting the Illini stuff wherever I am and know that, hey, we got some cachet as a basketball program now. There's something a bit under the radar about this offseason where we aren't getting talked about on Field of 68 very much. We aren't getting talked about nationally because we didn't get an AJ Store. And we didn't re-sign a Hunter Dickinson. Right? We didn't get those really proven commodities that probably commanded a couple $1,000,000 each. But I'm okay with that. I think that Underwood very confidently and assuredly said, I know what I want. I know the resources I have. He went out and he got it done. Now let's make it work. And that's the next step and the most important step. Talent accrual is one thing, and Underwood's very good at that. Over the years, though, last year was huge for me in this regard. It was not just the talent accrual to put yourself in a position to make an Elite Eight. It was the fact that they really did maximize what that offense could do. And this game is going towards offense. It is more difficult to stop a great offense than it is to score on a good defense. I do think in this day and age with how good these basketball players are insane. You watch Kasparas Jakucionis' tape. That's an 18-year-old doing these things with that like athletic and muscular body. The kid looks 22. It's a different era, and listen, Michael Jordan is and always will be my favorite, and I think, yes, the greatest basketball player ever for reasons beyond just talent, right? But on the whole, if you watch just a minute of NBA playoff action, it is insane how good these guys are. And I noticed, last year, I'll pick a random game, Minnesota at home when both teams could not miss. That was high-level basketball. And I know Minnesota didn't make the tournament, and after that game, we're conflicted because, well, we score a lot, but we can't stop anybody. Well, it was fine. We made an Elite Eight, and we stopped teams other than UConn. We stopped them when they mattered. But that was a high-level game. It's actually I'm just talking about it. It's intoxicating to think how freaking good these guys are. And Underwood in particular does a really good job of getting high-level players. There is arguably more top-to-bottom talent on this team. There are no Benjamin Bosnans Verdonks. Love you, BBV, but there's none of those guys in your 8 deep or 10 deep. How it all comes together is next, and that's what's exciting. So we will be around and be at the ready in case anything big happens, and appreciate you being patient. I'll put out the occasional column or something like that. And remember, the 200levelpod.com has our audio, video, and our columns as well. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching, however you get this podcast. And do me a favor, if you're on Apple Podcast, give us a rating and review. And it helps people discover us that might not have seen us before. All right, before we get out of here, DP Dough online at dpdough.com for all the best deals and prices, dpdough.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Give them a call today to get your AC checked out to make sure you do not have a stuffy, sweaty, and by virtue, stinky house. Because if you're sweaty and you're stuffy, it's going to be stinky. Just to make that leap. You don't want that. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, 217-841-4728. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And Owen Builders LLC online at owenbuildersllc.com. Get a free quote on your next home project from Luke Owen and his staff at owenbuildersllc.com. For Champagne Showers Podcast Network and for you, the listener, we appreciate you so much, and we will be around. In the meantime, summer break is about to begin. A lot of Dave concerts. Got the Rolling Stones. Sleeping in, which for me now is like 6:30 in the morning. I made it. 6 years of teaching. About to enter my 7th, but 2 months of just straight chilling. Sounds like I'm bragging. I apologize for that. We'll see you soon, though, everybody. Take care. It is the 200 level. See you, YouTube. Take care.